Hi, how are you?
I'm very good. I was just saying, I'm trying to warm up.
Oh, really? Yeah, you've got like stars over your head.
That's the Christmas decorations we haven't taken down.
You should check out the fire he's got going as well.
It's warm. It's hot.
Oh, nice. Wow.
It's so cold here. I was just saying to Anthony, it's so cold that this is probably the best seat because my teeth won't be chattering too much.
Really? Is it that cold?
Oh, it's freezing.
Wow. Because obviously I know you moved out to the sticks, didn't you? That was a couple of years.
Yeah. I did. We don't have heating. We don't have sorts of bod cons. It's a really old house. So when it's in winter, you definitely need to put the fire on, or you feel it.
So you don't have central heating?
Yeah, we do. I'm just
it's old house. The actual.
Yeah, I mean, it's made out of horsehair, pretty much. It's 800 years old, so it's just pretty drafty.
Wow. Has it got like ghosts?
Probably, yeah. Lots of evil spirits. I hear sort of loads of voices telling me to do bad stuff, but the usual. That's fine though, right? That's
yeah, nothing to worry about.
Do you want to see my accessories for the call?
Yeah.
I got the Notwicks pack.
Oh,
look at those bad boys!
Iconic.
There you go.
Yeah, nice.
Now I need some.
I don't know if I should wear them for the call. It might just be freaking.
You have to do this as well. This as well.
Yeah. It's good. I feel like I'm in the gang now.
Here we go. Oh dear.
They're amazing. This was your recommendation, Cubits.
Yeah, they're lovely. Which one are they? The Judds.
They are indeed.
Yeah, they look good. Yeah, mine have kind of gone a bit faded actually, and a bit. My wife says they look like they sort of used to be like that, and now they look like a faint yellow colour as we're on.
I got a red pair with pink lenses, which are amazing.
Oh, well, like polarized.
Blink, 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 blink. So I suppose. Thank you for joining us today.
No, pleasure. It's just
I
so
do
nice to see you and have a chat. I haven't spoken to you for ages.
I know and we're kind of killing two birds with one stone in a way, because we hope that other people will find this chat interesting as well.
Hopefully.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. So but look, thanks for joining Found Stars and Fun Stars, our Notwicks' latest attempt at kind of helping grow awareness and really sort of, I suppose in essence, as we just said, catch up and find out how some of the amazing founders that we've worked with in the past and had fun and seen their businesses grow, just kind of find out more about where you are and what the latest is, and clearly our audience are founders and I think funds, because there's obviously great interest in the collaborative side of the business on both parties. So I think it's always great when you've had success, and clearly WiFive is having success, to share those secrets of your success and of the journey so far, and clearly a few more anecdotes of really where you feel you can help those founders who might be starting off on that journey, which clearly, as Anthony and I know with Notwicks, it's I think people are wise, or if you're not wise, we are a consultancy helping founders navigate that journey, and there's always challenges, and we're the good people that try and help people like Prask and WiFive. Was it in 2018? I think we first started together. And oddly, I know you're really cold. I've actually got the window open here in southwest London, and that was probably the first plane of the day that's just gone over. It used to be every 5 minutes, because I used to be on the we are on the Heathrow flight path, and sad state of affairs, it's one every 3 or 4 hours at the moment. So apologies for that noise in the background. So
one of the things I want to hear about is how the name WiFive came about, and who thought of that, because it's brilliant.
It's well, I'm glad you like it. We sort of grown a bit tired of it, and it's sort of not that relevant anymore. Sadly, we came up with it because when we first started out, it was a very different business. So it was much broader. So we had this idea about. So my background is in interaction design, and I spent a lot of my career working with big brands and working out how they would get to interact with members of the general public. And this became, a lot of this became app-based. But then, there was this whole thing about effort or perceived effort versus perceived reward, and people didn't want to download an app in order to have an experience, especially when it was impulse driven or a one-off. So because of that, we were looking at these different connection mechanics and how could it be the most frictionless experience possible. And from that, we got to playing around with Wi-Fi protocols and setting up ad hoc Wi-Fi networks and serving app-like content through splash pages and
progressive web apps.
Yeah, all that sort of stuff, instant apps, and you've got Apple sort of doing their app clips and things like that. But it's sort of a precursor of that, really. And that's how we started. So it was very much about there was a huge Wi-Fi element to it. And then we were sort of this so sort of cheesy and naff and geeky, but it was about this. We were looking at this connection mechanic between sort of that it was like it's a handshake, sort of technically, I suppose, between devices. But we wanted it to be something that was really easy for whatever device you've got in your pocket, your bag, whatever it is, out of the box. And this was way back when it wasn't just iOS and Android. So there was a lot of options, but whatever you had out of the box without having to download anything, it should just work. So we wanted it to be, so this handshake had to be really it had to have that interoperability. And it was more, rather than a handshake, it was a bit more casual. So it was a bit more of like a high five. So this Wi-Fi high five is really tough, but that's sort of where it came from.
It's almost an inside joke.
But not a funny one.
An inside fun
between two people. Yeah, we're fun.
Perhaps now, Prask, you should change it to, instead of Wi-Fi, just 5. Just 5. Because you drop the Wi-Fi.
Because that would be super easy to train on. Oh yeah, we do. That was quite nice. So as we went from that, so when we started off, and we launched with amazing clients, we launched with BMW. They're our first client, and we'd filed a bunch of patents. But what we worked out was that we'd see this huge amount of engagement. So all these big clients that we had were really excited because they'd been trying to get people to engage with apps for years. And we'd been a big part of that. And people would be dropping huge amounts of money for an app that would live for 2 weeks. And that was great, right, in terms of us getting paid and all that good stuff.
But you could see that there was probably an end date to that phase.
Well, it's this sort of thing, I suppose, where if you're saying to somebody, look, jump through these hoops for 5 minutes and you get a free can of soft drink. If there's a certain kind of subsection of the population that might do that, but for a lot of people, they'll just drop their 50 pence or whatever a can of drink costs. That it's just not again back to effort versus reward.
Didn't match up.
So that's where that's where our heads were at. But suddenly we would get huge, as in thousands more of people engaging because it was so easy, and they didn't have to download anything, and we'd even got it to work, so you didn't even need a cellular data connection, and we didn't even provide an internet connection over the Wi-Fi. It was just all sort of local content, and it was amazing. But what we did find is that where we saw even more engagement wasn't where it was sort of a nice to have, and it was a sense of I'm a bit interested, I'm browsing something, but where there was a real specific user journey. And that, again, that's sort of, I suppose, just sort of that standard sort of advice, isn't it? You look at what people are doing, so get out of the building, see how people interact with your product in the world.
Be on the front lines.
Yeah, and people were, and it was with food and drink, when people sort of walked into a venue and they weren't just sort of browsing something out of interest because, it was a bit of advertising or a bit of marketing, but there was a very specific goal. So they wanted to order food and drink. And obviously the engagement was then through the roof because very few people walk into a bar restaurant and sort of to browse, right? It just, that doesn't happen. You buy food, you buy drink. So that's where we sort of honed it down. But
so can I ask, when did that all, sort of transition or happen, or when did the sort of razor focus kind of emerge? Was it over COVID or was it before then?
Oh no, well before then. It was back in 2018. I think it's those sorts of things where it wasn't like overnight. We would just look at the data that would come in, and we'd sort of go with the engagement was, right, because that's where the money is, and it's a business we're trying to run. And the thing for us was always, we want to solve real problems, but not only that, these have to be problems that the people that we're selling to deem worthy of solving. So it takes a while to sort of find out exactly what that is, and to really hone that. And that requires patience on the part of obviously, founders, staff, investors. People have to sort of be in it for the journey. So you have to sort of make sure you've got the right fit. Then you've got the buy-in of the people that are backing you, because I think it's not always that thing that, like a lightning strike, and it is for some. I've got friends and peers that they have that moment where it's this lightning strike. But whereas for us, we sort of just really found our niche, and it wasn't ever a pivot. It was just a gradual honing.
So going from BMW into hospitality, was that client-led solution, or was that something that you guys had identified? You built a solution and then went out to go find clients? Because I think that's something that entrepreneurs always, have a big debate about, right? Do you build it first and then try to sell it, or do you go find a client and then try to keep them along while you build it and get it all sorted?
I don't think there's one answer for that. It depends, and this is my sort of philosophy for which we might get into later, in terms of general advice. But I think it's different for different people and different businesses. But for us, partly because of our backgrounds, we had great black books of blue chip clients that sort of trusted us and believed in us and would give it a go. And then the technology was great. What we were offering worked. So it was relatively easy for us to get clients. But then it was a gradual shift, because almost by having a wide spread of clients, we were able to see where the focus should be, because where were we getting this insane level of engagement, 100% of people near enough engaging with something. So that it did take a bit of time, but I think it might have been, we worked, so we went through Wire in 2017, Telefonica's accelerator, and so as part of that, we were doing a bit of work with O2 in the UK, and we were live at the O2 Arena for a while, and that, I think there we saw a big focus,
because they have loads of F&B.
Yeah. But there was a few things we tested out, and we're always very open to it. We're big on sort of experimentation. I've got a sort of academic background in philosophy of science and falsification and things like that. So we have a sort of a real sort of good sort of scientific methodology, built into the business, and that whole sort of agile mentality and the way we approach things. So it was about experimentation, but then being data driven, not having a pet theory and melding the evidence to suit that.
Cherry picking everything.
Exactly. We're always really brutal. We still are. We're quite brutal about what we do and what we don't do. And even if there's sort of money waved at us, we won't always, if it doesn't fit, then we don't do it.
So I suppose dumbing this down a bit, Prask, for sort of some of the audience in essence, in the sense of what do you exactly do? Because clearly, you've evolved and kind of you've got customers, people like your product offering. What's it really kind of give your clients, big, small, SMEs? Why do they want to engage with you, buy your product, so to speak?
So WiFive today is a mobile order and pay solution. So the idea is that you can walk into a restaurant, a bar, whatever it may be, a hospitality venue serving food and drink, which is where the focus is at the moment, and you can just order and pay for whatever it is that you want with absolute ease. And it's not a distraction. You don't, back to what we were talking about before, you don't have to download something, you don't have a specific kind of device or anything like that. It will just work off, out of the box, as it were. So it's that seamless approach, so it doesn't interfere with your experience. If you're going out for a fine dining meal, where the front of house staff bring this huge level of theatre to it, right? And that is part of the experience. That's phenomenal. I'm a big fan of that sort of thing. But if you're going to a fast food restaurant, that's probably not the case. You probably want to spend your time with the people that you're with, or if it's something, if it's sort of food as fuel, you want to sort of grab that and go. So that whole sort of order and pay part of it doesn't really add positively to the experience. So if we can just bake it into our technology in such a way that it's just as seamless and as frictionless as possible, so it's efficient for the customers, but it's also efficient for the operators, for these hospitality businesses, because they can focus on pulling pints or serving food or making sure that guests are having a great time. That's better than them sort of you having to wave at them to get a check or whatever, to get the check.
So I suppose when we can go out again, when who knows, just like where will we be Wi-Fi'd in the background? Who are your kind of your big sort of clients, so to speak?
So we're B2B, so we're very much in the background. As it currently stands, you won't see sort of the Wi-Fi branding, or you might do sort of very, very subtly here and there. But we've got so many clients, so a lot of pubs, a lot of bars. We do a lot of independents, but in terms of enterprise clients, the likes of Pizza Pilgrims, Fur, ETM Group, there's some great operators across the country, across the UK that we're working with. But the split in terms of the market share is very much shifted toward, or very much sort of balanced in favour of SMEs. I think it's probably about 70-30 or even 80-20. So there's far more SMEs in the market than there are enterprise operators. So even though we've built this tech for enterprise, because when we sort of came to it, there were already sort of a few people out in the space trying to do things, but in our sort of humble opinion, it wasn't how it could be, or as good as it could be. And we really set out to build this amazing tech for enterprise, and that's what we did. And all of our initial operators were enterprise. But as time went on, we started, it was all about scalability for us. And we wanted to make sure that there was inherent scalability in the product and the business. And what that allowed is for us to take this amazing tech that we work with the likes of Prep using this amazing technology, but we can actually give that exact same product, all off the back of this same code base to the dog and duck down the road. And that there's a great democratization there of technology. You don't have to be McDonald's or Starbucks anymore to have that absolute top tier technology at your fingertips.
So this looks, sorry, Anthony, this just looks like I go into the dog and duck. The dog and duck tell me you've ordered through the app, and bingo bango, powered by you in the background, and seamless.
Yeah,
and
so
it's perfect for the new world, basically.
Yeah, well, it was consumers were pushing for this for a long time, because they've been trained on the aggregators, and you've got the likes of Open Table, things like this. People are used to doing stuff around food and drink with their phones, and taking pictures of their food to upload to Instagram and what have you. It was hospitality that sort of was a little bit slower getting there in terms of adopting this. But obviously, well even back in 2 years ago, 2019, when we were really sort of taking the final version of the product to market, there was a huge amount of interest and things were going great guns, and then sort of COVID hit, and then there was sort of about 2 weeks where I think there was just a bit of blind panic, understandably, because people were just worried about keeping the lights on. And then things sort of picked up, but more than ever. And that really accelerated things, because it went from being this thing that was, it was on vogue and people were really interested in it, to suddenly becoming a prerequisite for reopening. And in many places, it absolutely was legally a prerequisite for reopening, especially in parts of the US.
So another case of COVID being the great accelerator, as we've seen in quite a few businesses. One of the questions I had was, you were just saying that when you originally built it was for enterprise, but you're now seeing that it's more SMEs. I'm sure that people listening will be wondering, why that is. Is that a case of the bureaucracy that comes with trying to sell into big enterprise B2B clients, or it's just a more pressing need for smaller clients and they're able to, you know, play with new technologies more easily?
It's not. I don't think it's that difficult to sort of sell into enterprise. And obviously, you know, all of our enterprise operators are wonderful. We love them dearly, and you know, it's never difficult. But I think it's, well, you get different things. I would say from those different kinds of businesses. So a lot of the enterprise clients that we work with, they might put a team of 20 people on what we're doing. And even though it is a product, and you know, they get a product, there's a huge amount of customization that they can do themselves based on all of the back-end tools that we built for them to make it their own. You know, so it fits their brand and what they need it for. But then the level of, because these people are, you know, this is what they do for a living. These are sort of, you know, tech people in many ways. They can give us this level of feedback that we wouldn't get from your average independent, shall we say. So that really helps you hone the product, back to what we were saying before, get out of the building, listen to what people have to say. But in this situation, you're getting real expert advice about your product, and people that are going to be really straight with you because they're putting their name on it, because it's effectively white labeled for their brand.
Yeah.
So that's great. But then I think you know, the future is mobile, and especially in this sort of environment, it's just far, you know, the efficiencies that can be brought, you know, the operational efficiencies that can be brought to businesses rely on this sort of technology. And there's, you know, a lot that we talk a lot about, you know, well, what is the point of our business? And we say the future of hospitality is greater profitability. But greater profitability comes from operational efficiency, and you can only really hone in on that by making data-driven decisions. And in order to get that data, you need to sort of be collecting it. So a lot of sort of online businesses, whether they're sort of SMEs or enterprise, they know about what's happening online with their online sales because it's recorded in a certain way. But they have very little information about what's happening in their sort of bricks and mortar environments. And, you know, if somebody's browsing a menu, you have, you know, unless you've got some serious hardcore tech in there, right, you don't know what, you know, where their eyeballs are going. You don't know what they're looking at. You don't really know the conversations that they're having about, you know, oh, should we have this, or let's have that. Actually, no, we've changed our minds because we've seen this. There's all this sorts of information, like who's coming in when, how much they, you know, who they're coming in with, what are they ordering in sort of sets or groups, all of this information. So this is sort of incredibly valuable and allows you to run a much more sort of present day business rather than just, you know, a tavern type thing, you know, for 200 years ago.
That's the value you bring to the dog and duck.
This is it, the dog and duck. We don't have a dog and duck here. I live in a tiny village, and there's an absolutely phenomenal restaurant, Matt Gillen's Heritage, across the road, which is just.
Are they a customer?
But, are they a customer? No, they're not a customer. They're not. I must speak to that. I don't think
there's an opportunity.
I must go and speak to. It's never come up in conversation. But we have more and more clients that are, you know, in that kind of that sort of upper echelons of, you know, and fine dining and things like that. But again, this isn't gonna, you have to sort of look at your business and think, well, where can I bring the efficiencies to it? And this goes back to, you know, SME versus enterprise. Now that this is within reach of SMEs, because it is intrinsically affordable, but more than that, it's actually going to, you know, increase your bottom line and increase your efficiencies, increase your profits, as well as your takings, because you can just increase your throughput, for example, and, you know, you don't necessarily have to have as many front of house staff, you know, taking orders and taking payment. They can focus on other things, and that sort of democratization is a huge piece of it. But I think different businesses can use it for different things. As I say, it might be that you've got an incredibly busy bar and you don't want your staff stopping to take an order and then, you know, pull a pint and then take a payment. You know, that order and pay bit can be effectively outsourced to technology, and then you can have, you know, the staff, you know, bit of banter with the customers, making the drinks, you know, and all that.
Focus on the delivery instead of the
exactly. It's the fulfillment side of it, because that's not, as we sort of talked about before, there's only a very small subset of businesses in hospitality where that is part of the theatre and part of the experience.
Yeah. So within this framework and looking out to when we come back come back to the restaurants and places where you're driving the technology in these different SMEs, is it a competitive marketplace since I last worked with you? Have there been copycats? Have there been big companies trying to do this in new challenges and or challengers? Just if you could give us a bit more on the market dynamics, so to speak.
Definitely. Like when we came to it, we weren't the first to market with this at all, but we definitely thought that the approach that and it was a very small number of other sort of players in the space had taken wasn't how we thought it should be done, and we quickly sort of got to the forefront of what we were doing. And then what we found is that everyone just started copying what we were doing, which is great because it shows that we're on the right track. And I think certain people take it different ways. I always think it's great because it's a compliment. Because
imitation is the highest form of flattery.
Yeah, and it's validation because these are smart people as well. And if they look at it and they see it's successful, but they also make their own decisions and think actually this is the way to go, then that's again it's more validation. It's a different kind of validation to sort of from operators that we sell to or customers, end users using it. But it still has its place. But I think what was interesting is seeing this whole sort of no apps required sort of mentality. And from our perspective, that was a really big thing. It's just been adopted by pretty much everyone now, and you even see that. We see sort of copy that we'd used in ads, a couple of years back now. Sort of people are using that in their materials. This is just kind of the standard. And there, since COVID, I think everyone saw suddenly there was this huge opportunity with mobile order and pay. So there's just, we see every day there's a new competitor out there, and to different degrees. But for us, we would only really consider somebody a competitor if we hear about them from operators. If operators are talking about something, then you think, oh, hang on, actually they're probably worth keeping an eye on, or sort of looking at what they're up to. But that is an incredibly small number. Less than count them on one hand. But there are thousands of sort of players in the space just because it's such an obvious opportunity.
It's the difference between just existing and competing, it sounds like.
Yeah, but it's nice that people have a go, right? I think that's always to be encouraged. And it keeps you on your toes, and it keeps you focused. And I think a lot of this is about having real laser focus, not being distracted. And I think that will always if you play your cards right, that will sort of keep you ahead of the pack. But we have a very different approach to pretty much all of the competition, just because we're very product driven. I think our ambitions are quite different to sort of many of the others that we see. We're not an agency, so this isn't a bespoke build sort of setup. It's not like you come to us with a brief and we sort of hammer that out and then we build it for you. This is a product. This is a sort of a platform, and that doesn't suit everybody. And we've politely sort of gone separate ways with operators that approached us because they were looking for something really specific, and that's great. And other people have gone and built things for them that are absolutely phenomenal, but that's just not what we do. We're very much a product.
So with that in mind, Prask, COVID, the whole of last year, a good deal of good business was done, and like looking ahead to this year, new year, new start, and all those corny things everyone says at this time of the year. What's the sort of where are you? Where's the shaking and the grooving, so to speak?
So last year, it's this whole situation is an absolute tragedy, and there's no getting away from that. But specifically talking about WiFive, about the business, it was definitely something that accelerated us because of the things we talked about before, right place at the right time, and it suddenly became this sort of a real must-have. So we grew massively. Back from when we were sort of just a couple of founders, beginning of 2018. So I think you mentioned the other day when we were having a chat, was 8 of us when you were there. So we were about 20, 25, I think, going into the pandemic. And then we pretty much doubled the team within about sort of 6 months of that, sort of going into Q3, Q4.
Did that come with fresh fundraising as well, or?
No, that was just from the raise we did. We did quite a big seed round back in 2018, sort of end of 2018. But we're in revenue. We were in revenue just going into the pandemic, but then obviously everything shut, and because of the way that we, our pricing model, there was sort of no money taken from, I think it was some point, it was around mid-March last year, wasn't it? Until the 4th of July when everything reopened again, and everything reopened on one day. But we've been sort of selling and sort of building up our partnerships throughout that time of lockdown when UK hospitality was closed. So when it opened again on the 4th of July, sort of, everything sort of flew back up again. So that I mean, it was from the business's perspective.
Just quickly, like when you doubled the team, was that clear a mix of developers and sales, or what was there a particular speciality that you were looking for in those hires?
Mainly engineering. I mean, we're really engineering focused. So we're just over 50 now, I think, and we've probably got about 18 or 19 vacancies that we're hiring for currently. But it's mostly engineering. I think we all of the success. Sorry, what's that?
Mainly engineering vacancies.
Oh yeah, it's engineering and product. But most of our all of our sales pretty much have come from 2 or 3 people. I say 3 people because John, my co-founder, who's our COO, he's done a lot of sales as well. He's a great salesman. But we've just got 2 salespeople. So again, it's back to sort of the scalability of the business. But our focus, especially at this early stage, is really on sort of engineering and product.
And then I suppose looking at you could maybe answer about 2021 or quickly before we,
so 2021, I mean, we're just into it, but we've just done a bridge round, which we've sort of pulled down the funds in 2 tranches, but that's closing in a week. And that was really just to, we were going to do the Series A at the tail end of last year, but just because of COVID, really, it just didn't make sense to, because we had that huge period where things were closed, and then another lockdown in November. So we just thought we'll do this bridge round, and then we'll do the Series A. We'll push that back a bit. So we're doing our Series A in Q2 of this year. But yeah, we're super excited. We've just started to venture out into new geographies. So we're doing quite a bit in North America at the moment, in US and Canada, a huge number of partnerships around Europe, and other parts of the Americas. So yeah, that's really exciting in terms of sort of geographic expansion.
That growth geographically is through different operator partners, I imagine, or
so it's through a lot of our sort of other sort of tech partners, if you will, other players in that, the sort of the tech ecosystem of hospitality,
including your solution into their stack, kind of.
Pretty much, yeah. And also just a lot of the operators that we've worked with in the UK, especially on obviously the enterprise front, they have, they have locations further afield, so that's made it a bit easier also to expand in that way. But there's a huge amount that we're planning from a product perspective, some really exciting stuff I can't go into, bit of cloak and dagger, but that we will be launching in the next few months. It's sort of very different to sort of the Wi-Fi that people sort of know and love today, but it's that sort of next iteration of it, sort of the next level of that. But we can't wait to sort of take the pull the
things besides the name change, huh?
Yes, so that we're trying to coincide that, because those things sort of are very closely related. So
watch this space.
Absolutely.
I think, Prask, you've always struck me as one of the founders that I've worked with, and just going back many years to sort of pre-consultancy, like I started Notwicks in 2011. So you're really great personality. You're very people focused, and I'm just like curious. Obviously, you've hired doubled your workforce. You probably not all worked in the same office yet, or probably will this year, hopefully, fingers crossed. I mean, culture, you were big on that. I remember when I worked with you. Kind of how are you maintaining that? How are you building that sort of bond with your team? Because I know that's a really important factor for a lot of founders.
Yeah, it's the most important thing. It's that thing that you can, it's that real competitive edge that people can't replicate. No, culture's always been huge for us, and I think you have to proactively create it. Otherwise, that vacuum will just be filled by something, and that something might not be what's best for what you're trying to achieve. So culture is huge for us. It was really tricky. I mean, it still is really tricky doing everything remotely. We back in March, when last year, when the PM said, everyone should work from home, from next week or whatever, we had a 20-minute meeting and then made that decision. And then the next day, everyone was working from home, which is a lot easier for a tech company where you have, your stand-ups and your retros and all of these things. You have that structure in place. It's a bit easier than if you've got less structure to your sort of day to day. But it was really difficult, and it still is quite difficult, because we are quite touchy-feely. We're a really sociable group, and we hire for culture. So, in our interview process, we have people that come in that might not necessarily have be in the same department as the person that the candidate's going to be sort of moving into, but they're there to sort of almost screen for culture. And this isn't a case of we don't hire people like us in that. It's not people like us PLU sort of mentality, or what somebody I heard refer to the other day, which was a fit in or fuck off, which is it's charming. But sorry,
I'm gonna have to find the censor button.
Not sure what this is going out, sorry. But I think it's about values, right? So we have a very, very wide spread in terms of the people in the business. We have all sorts of people from whatever metric you want to think of. The unifying bit there, the bit that's in the Venn diagram where everyone sort of overlaps, is their values. They believe in certain things, and they and they're just, these are basic things. It isn't some sort of magic secret sauce. We just sort of want people that are just good people, decent people, respectful people that have ambition and are willing to sort of work really hard. And it's not that difficult to find, right? Most people are good. But that was much harder doing that remotely, and suddenly everyone sort of spread out and not being in the office, because we were always in the office, and we were very much to build that culture. Is 5 days a week everyone was in the office, and then suddenly we're all working remotely, and there's only so many Zoom quizzes that realistically anyone can stomach.
So have you done any team building video game sessions, for instance, everybody on Fortnite or something?
We've done a few sort of things, some more successful than others. We just to sort of answer the question from before, I think over communicating was a big thing, and I would have we started off with me I had one-to-one sessions with everybody in the business, and some of those tailed off as I sort of felt that people were comfortable picking up the phone to me or Slack or whatever it might be, and when they needed it. And so the relationship was in a place where they felt that familiar that if they needed anything, without hesitation, they would contact me. And then I sort of felt a bit more comfortable that we didn't need to check in, scheduled every week sort of thing. But we have sort of all hands every week. It's like a town hall. We had a Christmas party because we thought we were going to be able to have a proper Christmas party, but then we couldn't. We thought about should we just to get 2 people in the company to get married, or so then we could get more people there. But we ended up having a sort of a remote Christmas party, which was very well organised by the team, and we had a magician there, which was quite funny. And it was just it was a bit wacky, but it was cool. And we've done sort of different things. We sort of did a quiz for Halloween and the usual sort of stuff, like games online. And we used to play quite a few games on sort of a Friday sort of drinks thing.
So looking at you talked about the growth in the business, really fascinating. How successful you're becoming, the team has doubled. Clearly you're a big man manager. I suppose we need to dig a bit more into what would be your top tips for the founders that are listening. And I suppose also with that, I always like to know, you are a human, not a robot. What is your biggest groan about what you do and where you are, and the journey, so to speak? Yeah,
that's interesting. I think my philosophy on the whole sort of tips thing is, and I think this was exacerbated by sort of going through an accelerator and been on all sorts of programs, and you know, a lot of them are great. Well, they're all great in this, you know, from a certain angle. But I think you often get, like, you know, people put books out, or there'll be loads of fireside chats, and it'll be someone that's had great success, and it's like, you know, like, condense it into sort of, you know, a bit of a soundbite, you know, like how can the people in the audience sort of just, you know, replicate your success? And I just don't, it's like, from my perspective, it's like if you went to, you know, if you asked a doctor just to sort of, you know, give everybody that kind of like diagnosis, but people got all sorts of ailments. And I don't think one, you know, there isn't really a silver bullet. And the stuff that is so generic. I generally feel that it's stuff that they probably know already. You know, it's like a doctor saying, you know, well, you know, sleep well, you know, get some exercise, eat well, you know, live, love, laugh type, you know, sort of that kind of thing. And I think that works for being a founder. I think you need to do those things. You need to look after yourself, you know, physically and mentally. So that you're in a good place, because you'll make the best decisions when you're not or most people make the best decisions when they're not hyper stressed and when they feel that they have options. It's when you don't have options that you start making poor decisions. So I would say the best advice would be try and give yourself options. I don't mean that in like a shareholder sort of equity sort of sense, but make sure that you've always got options, because then, you know, with choice comes that kind of sanity, and you don't feel that you're backed into a corner. Because if you are, or if you back yourself into a corner, or you let other people back you into a corner, and that could be customers or, you know, investors, whatever, staff, then you don't have choice. So my biggest, you know, or best piece of advice that I would say is just make sure you've always got options. But just speak to people, be a human being, treat your staff with respect. Treat people how they want to be treated, not, you know, how you want to be treated, because people are different, and you've got to treat people in different ways. You know, I might talk to, you know, 2 different members of, you know, the team in completely different ways, because they're completely different people, and people respond differently to different things. So I think you've got to be really empathetic, and it's the soft skills, I think, are far more important as a team grows than, you know, the sort of the hard skills that really helped you when you were, you know, this sort of scrappy little startup.
Yeah. And is there any little tiny groan that you might have?
Thousands of groans. I try not to groan. I think you have to be super optimistic and a super kind of glass half full person to be a founder or a successful founder, because you're going to get knocked back a lot. And I always, one other bit of advice I'd always say, you know, be careful of who you share your dreams with, because those are fragile things, right? So not that you want to surround yourself with people that are going to sort of, you know, make you feel good, because that's super dangerous, but you've got to be careful who you share certain things with. But in terms of groans, I don't really have any big groans. I think there's always, you know, it'd always be nice to have more of things and sort of, you know, want that extra bit. But I'm quite satisfied with how, you know, of my lot in life, I suppose. But yeah, it's difficult working remotely. Like when we will be going back to an office, we've even picked an office that we're ready to sign on as soon as we can go back. But we won't be going back 5 days a week. It'll be a bit more flexible.
Yeah.
But my groan would be sort of not being able to sort of be with the team and see friends and family. It's difficult. It's difficult.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned earlier, Prask, that, you know, you probably got a Series A coming in over the course of this year. You know, I always find it fascinating, the dynamic of the founders and investors, and you know, it's kind of, I think there was a lot written this week about founders are very, very important. It's not all about the investors. It's almost like there's a bit of a misnomer that the investors choose the founders to be successful. I think sometimes you have to turn it on its head, because clearly, I think you as a human being would be looking at an investor as a personal relationship. So I'm kind of like keen to understand, you know, perhaps for the investors listening, what would you look for if, you know, there was an investor out there that thought, wow, Wi-Fi's amazing, I'd like to get a slice of that pie. You know, kind of what's your advice to them, and what's your sort of the biggest thing you look for in investors?
I think it's different for, you know, it's a matchmaking exercise. So again, with sort of any sort of relationship, you know, different things sort of fit and slot together. Personally, I love it when somebody's done their homework and you know, they ask the intelligent questions that show that they've done their homework. so we can get past the sort of the really obvious stuff and get into the detail really quickly. Because it shows that they're generally interested, and it's not, and they put the time in, because you want to feel. What's that?
They're not ticking boxes.
Exactly. Yeah. And you want to know that they're sort of generally invested sort of mentally in it, at least to some degree already. But for me, it's about a bit of banter is nice. You want somebody that you can get on with. And it should be somebody that, you know, you're not going to be sort of upset about being trapped with a lift, trapped with in a lift sort of thing. And you can go for a beer with them, or a drink or coffee or whatever. And it's fun, because if it's not fun, then you know, why are you even doing it? And it'd be the same way that we look at staff. I think for me, when I speak to investors, I'm thinking about the culture fit. Maybe not consciously, but subconsciously, I'm thinking about, you know, am I looking forward to the next time I'm speaking to them? Or if there's any sort of sense of slight dread, then, you know, it's obviously massive warning bells. But, you know, I've met a lot of investors over the years who I think are just brilliant, and they're just nice people, and irrespective of whether they'd be interested in the business, they're people that you stay in touch with because they're just like so easy to get along with. So I think personality for me is a big part of it, but I don't think that's something that, you know, anyone's going to listen to and be like, I'm going to be really charming and charismatic and have a bit of banter. It doesn't really work like that. But then I know a lot of other founders who aren't like that, and they're incredibly transactional, and that's what they want from it. They want, you know, they want to sort of cut to the chase, shake hands, or not anymore, bump elbows, whatever, and move on. And that's fine. So it's sort of horses for courses. So I think
we've got a few of those.
But you've got to kind of read the room, I think, and see, you know, that's I suppose that's it. When back to the sort of the fine dining analogy, you know, you go to that sort of a really good restaurant, they will gauge very quickly what kind of a party you are. You know, do you want that super formal treatment? Do you want a bit of, you know, a bit of a laugh kind of thing, or a mixture of the two? And I think that's how it works with these sorts of things. If they can gauge really quickly how I'm, you know, how I want to be sort of, you know, how my brain works, then I always think, well, if they get how my brain works, then they're going to get how the business works, and we're going to get on famously. So that's probably, that's my.
And then I suppose it's a classic. We're coming to quite near the end of our time talking, which has been really great, really fascinating to catch up. Really enjoyed it, and I think a lot of people will have learned some new fantastic things about Wi-Fi. On, I suppose, the classic, is it, I can't remember the name who used to do This Is Your Life, Eamon, I don't know, it's in the 70s or 80s, I used to watch it, but This Is Your Life was obviously a show, and it's kind of like something I wanted to say to you, like, obviously you've got Wi-Fi. Outside of Wi-Fi, what's the big buzz? What do you get fun out of? What you're up to? How do you relax and enjoy those times, not stuck behind the Wi-Fi, what is it, rat on a wheel type thing?
It never feels like, I never feel like I'm on a hamster wheel. I mean, I do love it, but well, we moved out to the countryside. We moved out to West Sussex in May of 2019, which was like my sort of zombie apocalypse sort of plan, but it's worked brilliantly for COVID. But the reason we did was just so there's space for the, you know, for the dogs to run free, all that sort of thing. But we as a family, we spent most living in, so I grew up in Brixton, very much a sort of city person. I've only ever lived in cities until I moved out here, but it was just this thing of finding that almost with every bit of free time, we find ourselves sort of trying to get out to, you know, the South Downs or whatever it might be, out to the countryside. And then it just sort of made sense. Well, why are we doing that? Why don't we just move? Because this is obviously where we want to be. So almost 2 years been out here. I do a lot of, not so much at the moment, but I was doing a huge amount of trail running. I love just being outside. A lot of walking the dog, being in nature, in the forests, out in the fields. A bit of a farmer at heart.
Fully dressed, I hope.
Fully dressed. Most of the time. All sorts of things happen out here, Chris. You should come on a bit. It's very similar. So the village I live in is absolutely brilliant. I love it to bits. And it's a real, there's such a sense of community. And it's what I think it's sort of a little bit like being in one of those old sort of Agatha Christie sort of novels. It's brilliant. But I love going out. I love hospitality in terms of sort of going out and, you know, eating and drinking. I love food, love going to the pub. seeing friends, all those.
Are you missing that
Oh,
itch,
desperately.
that kind of, yeah.
Desperately.
And
Before my
tough.
son was born, we used to spend, whole weekends in the pub. It's just, I
not
look
working on
forward-
Wi-Fi, I hope.
Sometimes.
Product research.
He's 5 and a bit now, so he's a bit older than the company. So no, very much before Wi-Fi.
Great.
But yeah, looking forward to getting back outside, seeing friends, dinner parties, going out to bars and
Human
pubs.
life. Yeah.
That's it.
Contact.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, I think we made up for it today with a bit of zooming, but it's been great to see you, mate, and congrats on all your success. It's been
Thank you, and likewise.
a story I've looked at many years. Oh, thank you. And but I'm sure it's still just the start. You're on a sort of trajectory to big things by the sound of things. So I hope 2021 is as good as we can all wish for you. So well done.
Thank you, Chris.
Congrats. And
thanks, Anthony, as well. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Prask. Take care. Have a lovely weekend.
Take care.
We'll be in touch. Cheers. Bye.